In a world where fame burns brighter than any star and silence often hides the loudest screams, Through the Broken Glass tells a story that shatters illusions and exposes the raw, trembling truth behind the glittering facade of stardom. It is not merely a story. It is a reflection, a storm, a mirror cracked into 1,000 emotional fragments. When Xiao Zhan walked onto the set that cold morning, the city was still half asleep. Mist coiled around the towering skyscrapers like whispers of forgotten dreams. The cameras were not yet rolling, but something in the air felt charged, unspoken, electric. Wang Yibo stood by the window of the dressing room, staring at the city below. His reflection in the glass seemed almost fragile, distorted by the faint scratches on the pane. Two reflections, one real, one illusion, and perhaps neither entirely whole. Their eyes met for the first time that day, and something unspoken passed between them, a quiet acknowledgement that the story they were about to tell would change them both. The director's voice sliced through the quiet. Scene 1, action. What followed wasn't just acting, it was transformation. Xiao Zhan's voice trembled with raw emotion as his character confronted the ghosts of his past. Wang Yibo's eyes, cold, unreadable, hid storms within. Every glance, every pause, every heartbeat between them carried tension so sharp it could cut through glass. The set lights flickered, almost in sync with their breathing, and for a fleeting second, the line between performance and reality dissolved. They weren't two actors anymore. They were two souls standing on the edge of something too real, too close. Behind the camera, the crew held their breath. Even the air seemed afraid to move. When the director finally yelled, "Cut!" the silence that followed was heavier than any applause could ever be. Xiao Zhan exhaled, shoulders trembling. Wang Yibo looked away, his jaw tightening as if trying to lock something inside. That was the first crack. But like glass, once fractured, things could never truly return to what they were. As filming continued, both men found themselves drawn deeper into their characters. Xiao Zhan's portrayal of a man haunted by guilt felt almost too personal. Wang Yibo, playing the cold observer, a man who saw the world only through broken reflections, found his own walls starting to crumble. Late one night, when most of the crew had gone home, Xiao Zhan remained behind on set. The rain outside drummed softly against the glass windows, distorting the city lights into 1,000 shimmering fragments. He stood there, tracing one of the cracks in the window pane with his fingertip. "Do you ever wonder," he murmured, not realizing Wang Yibo had entered the room, "if we're all just reflections trying to pretend we're whole?" Wang Yibo stepped closer, his reflection joining Xiao Zhan's in the rain-streaked glass. "Maybe," he replied quietly, "but sometimes, even broken mirrors show the truth better than the perfect ones." For a long moment they stood side by side, their reflections fractured by the uneven glass. It was a haunting image. Two men, two stars, two stories, each broken in ways the world could never see. The next day's shoot was unlike any before. The scene demanded confrontation, one filled with emotional chaos and brutal honesty. Xiao Zhan's character accused Wang Yibo's of betrayal, of silence, of watching as everything fell apart. It wasn't scripted, but something inside Xiao Zhan broke open. The words that came out weren't just lines. They were truths, raw and real, bleeding into every syllable. "Do you even care?" Xiao Zhan shouted, his voice cracking. "Or are you just hiding behind your glass again?" Wang Yibo froze. For a second, his carefully constructed calm shattered. The way he looked at Xiao Zhan was not acting. It was pain, reflection, regret. Then, with eyes glinting like shards of shattered glass, he whispered, "I was watching because I was afraid to touch you. Afraid that if I did, everything would fall apart." The director didn't call cut. He didn't dare. The room felt alive with something uncontainable, emotion spilling like light through cracks. When the scene ended, everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. That night, fans online would later call it the most real moment in modern drama. But neither Xiao Zhan nor Wang Yibo spoke of it again. As weeks passed, filming drew to a close, but something inside them had changed. Behind the laughter and the flash of cameras during interviews, there was a strange, lingering quiet between them, one made of everything unsaid. Xiao Zhan once caught Wang Yibo staring at a broken mirror backstage. The younger man's reflection splintered into a dozen tiny faces. "You ever think we're too good at pretending?" Xiao Zhan asked softly. Wang Yibo didn't look away. "Pretending is easy," he said. "It's remembering who we are when the glass clears that's hard." When the final scene came, it was almost poetic. Their characters stood before a large shattered mirror, symbols of everything they had endured. In the script, they were supposed to walk away separately, symbolizing the end of a painful journey. But Xiao Zhan hesitated. He turned to Wang Yibo, something unplanned flickering in his eyes. Then, instead of walking away, he placed a trembling hand on Wang Yibo's shoulder. The gesture wasn't written, but it spoke volumes, about forgiveness, connection, and the courage to face one's reflection. When the scene ended, the entire set fell into stunned silence. Even the director seemed unable to speak. What had been captured on camera wasn't just a performance. It was truth distilled through emotion. Weeks later, when Through the Broken Glass premiered, the world watched in awe. Viewers called it hauntingly beautiful, a masterpiece that blurred the line between art and life. Every scene shimmered with intensity, every look carried history. Critics praised the chemistry between Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo, raw, vulnerable, magnetic. But those who looked deeper saw something more. They saw two people who had stripped away fame, fear, and perfection, bearing their souls through every crack in the glass. In interviews, Xiao Zhan often smiled when asked about the project, but his eyes held stories untold. "Sometimes," he said once, "you have to see yourself through the broken pieces to understand who you really are." Wang Yibo, ever quiet, added during one rare conversation, "Broken glass can still reflect the light, if you're brave enough to look." Those words became the film's legacy. Months later, a small exhibit opened in a downtown gallery, a tribute to Through the Broken Glass. The centerpiece was a shattered mirror, framed in soft white light. Visitors could see themselves in its pieces, distorted but beautiful. On the corner of the frame was a tiny plaque that read, "To those who found courage in their cracks. XZ and WY." Fans who came to the exhibit said they could almost feel the lingering presence of the two stars, the quiet strength of Xiao Zhan, the enigmatic depth of Wang Yibo. And maybe that was the point. Because Through the Broken Glass wasn't just about brokenness. It was about the way light finds its way through the fractures, the way people heal not by erasing their scars but by embracing them. Even after the cameras stopped rolling, even after the applause faded, the echoes remained. Somewhere, perhaps in another city, two reflections still stood by a window, no longer afraid of the cracks, but grateful for the light they let in. The night had fallen heavy and cold, yet the lights of the city refused to dim. They glittered like tiny shards scattered across the darkness, reflecting on every polished surface of the towering studio windows. Xiao Zhan stood there once again, staring out at the world beyond the glass, his thoughts spiraling into the same haunting question that had followed him since filming began. When does acting stop, and when does reality begin? The echoes of their last scene still pulsed through his veins. The confrontation, the tears, the trembling in his voice. It hadn't been just performance. It had felt real. And that was what scared him most. As the clock struck midnight, the studio door creaked open. A gust of cold air swept in, and Wang Yibo stepped through. His expression unreadable, but his eyes, those deep, storm-filled eyes, betraying a quiet turmoil. "You're still here," Wang Yibo said, voice low, almost blending into the hum of the rain outside. Xiao Zhan didn't turn. "I couldn't leave," he replied. "It feels like the scene never ended." Wang Yibo took a few slow steps closer. The faint reflection of the two of them shimmered in the cracked glass window, two silhouettes blurred by raindrops and fractured light. "Maybe it didn't," Wang Yibo murmured. "Maybe some stories don't stop when the cameras do." There was something haunting about the way he said it, like he wasn't talking about the script anymore. The silence that followed was thick, charged, unspoken words flickering between them like sparks waiting for oxygen. Then, in a voice so soft it barely reached across the space, Xiao Zhan said, "When I look through that glass, I see everything we pretend not to feel." Wang Yibo's jaw tightened. He moved closer until he was standing beside him, both of their reflections now almost fused into one. "Pretending is part of surviving," he said. "But sometimes when I look at you, I forget where the act ends." The air froze. Xiao Zhan finally turned to meet his gaze. And in that instant, time seemed to lose its grip. The hum of electricity from the studio lights, the rain's rhythm, the faint creak of the floor beneath their feet, all faded until there was only the sound of their breathing, perfectly in sync. Suddenly, the studio lights flickered out, plunging the room into darkness except for the faint glow of the city beyond. They both startled, laughter bubbling out softly, breaking the tension for a heartbeat. "Guess even the lights can't handle this much drama," Xiao Zhan said with a small smile. Wang Yibo chuckled, shaking his head. "Or maybe the universe knows when things are too real." For a long moment, they stood there in the dim light, surrounded by shadows and reflections that seemed to move with them. Xiao Zhan reached out, running his fingers lightly across the cracked windowpane. "You know," he said quietly, "when glass breaks, it never truly fits back together the same way. It remembers the fracture." Wang Yibo looked at him, his gaze unreadable. "Maybe that's what makes it beautiful," he said. "It's still glass, still reflects, just differently." Outside, lightning flashed, brief and brilliant, and for an instant their reflections looked almost alive. Two figures bound not by fame or friendship, but by something deeper, more fragile, truth. Later that night they filmed another scene, a quiet one, almost meditative. Their characters sat side by side, no words, just silence. The director called it the reflection scene. It was meant to symbolize healing. But as the camera rolled, something unexpected happened. Xiao Zhan looked into the mirror on set, a prop, large and beautifully cracked, catching the soft studio lights, and for a moment he saw not his character but himself. The exhaustion, the pressure, the silent expectations. And beside him, Wang Yibo's reflection was steady, calm, but his eyes shimmered with understanding. Xiao Zhan spoke softly, unscripted. "We're all mirrors, aren't we? Showing the world what it wants to see." Wang Yibo turned, his response also unplanned. "Then maybe it's time we showed them what's real." The director didn't yell cut. No one dared to. The cameras kept rolling as the two of them sat there, the light bending through the cracks in the mirror, scattering over their faces like threads of gold and silver. It was a moment that no script could have predicted. A moment that blurred fiction and reality so completely, it became something timeless. When filming wrapped for the night, the set fell into a hush. Everyone felt it, the weight of something extraordinary hanging in the air. Xiao Zhan sat quietly, still staring at the mirror. Wang Yibo walked over, his voice barely above a whisper. "You brought something real into that scene," he said. "That's not easy." Xiao Zhan smiled faintly. Maybe it wasn't acting this time. There was no need for more words. Their reflections in the broken glass said everything. The next day, during a promotional shoot, the photographer asked them to pose beside the same cracked mirror used on set. The light hit it just right, splintering into hundreds of tiny beams that danced across their faces. The result was breathtaking. Two stars framed by imperfection, made more human, more radiant, by the cracks surrounding them. That photo went viral overnight. Fans flooded the internet with messages about the symbolism, how the broken glass reflected not weakness, but strength, not endings but rebirth. And through it all, Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo remained silent, letting the story speak for itself. Weeks later, during an interview, the host asked them what through the broken glass meant to them personally. Xiao Zhan paused before answering. "It's about finding beauty in the flaws," he said softly. "Because sometimes, the broken parts are the ones that let the light in." Wang Yibo nodded. "It's about reflection," he added. "The courage to face yourself, no matter how shattered the image seems." The audience fell silent, moved by the sincerity in their voices. It wasn't just a performance anymore, it was a message. A mirror held up to everyone watching. Because through the broken glass was more than a story. It was an awakening. It reminded people that even the brightest stars carry cracks within them, that strength isn't found in perfection, but in the courage to stand before the mirror and still shine. And as the credits rolled on that chapter of their lives, one truth remained. Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo didn't just act, they reflected something that would stay with viewers forever. So when you look at your own reflection, when you see the cracks, the flaws, the fractures, remember this. It's not the glass that defines you. It's the light that passes through. And in that light, every broken piece becomes something beautiful. Glowing star, if you were touched by this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive, and together we'll keep finding beauty, even through the broken glass. Dizzy.